My name is Eloy Rivas Sanchez. I make a living teaching and doing research. I teach classes on sociology at Nebraska University, at the University of here in Ottawa, Carleton University, and I also do research on precarious migration, people who are refugee claimants, refugee seekers, or people who are living in Canada without permits, without documents, let's say.
Thank you so much. Um, this is something we've talked about in the past, but during the pandemic, our society has relied so heavily on migrants for various jobs, but, things like delivery, even working in hospitals, long-term care homes. And I was kind of thinking about how the Quebec government promised to specifically honor migrant workers in hospitals and long-term care homes by deeming them as guardian angels, which essentially meant that they wouldn't be deported. However, only after like about a few months, this was proven not to be legally binding, and the government started to deport people even from positions that I guess they deemed as guardian angel positions. Um, do you have any kind of thoughts or reaction on this you'd like to share?
Yes, absolutely. It's well, this just an example of how really the the dissonance between discourse and really actions. Um, we like to sell the image of Canada as being welcome to refugees. And I could say, to some extent, it's true. I mean, the general public, I could say, the Canadian public in general, are people who are very welcome. There are a lot of organizations to work together to welcome immigrants, regardless of their status. But when it comes to the government, really, we have policies that are not reflective of that, and that is a good example, right? We say, there are guardian angels, there are people who are providing the fundamentals for us to be secure, to have food in our tables, to people who clean up hospitals, and so on and so forth. And so we are going to provide a path to permanent residency to those. And at the end of the day, it didn't happen. In fact, I don't know, probably the Canadian public know, but it's important to say it. Um, just there was a campaign in Montreal run by Solidarity Across Borders with one member of the community, an incredible person that I met personally, coming from the Ivory Coast, doing a lot of service working in hospitals, and then he got COVID working in the hospitals in the long term hospitals, and he was happy when he learned about this. That the government was classifying him and classifying them in general as a guardian angels, and that he was hoping the possibility of becoming Canadian permanent resident. But at the end of the day, it didn't happen. He got deportation order, and his life became a hell, literally, very stressful and very unhealthy. And yes, I believe that is what happens. We like to have an image about ourselves, but when it comes to public policy, to state practices, the reality is really very different. It's completely contradictory to this. In the during the pandemic, sorry. Oh yes, pandemic. Sorry for my English. uh, in several countries, the richest countries of the world are the ones who receive normally refugee seekers, and most of them actually put a stop to deportations because of humanitarian reasons, right? It's not health. It's not safe for people to be pushed out of the country, crossing borders and stuff in the context of the COVID-19. UK, United States, Ireland, they put a moratorium on deportations. Canada did it only for like 6 months in 2020. And that's another example, at an international level. It really, the Canadian institutions, the Canadian state is not acting accordingly to what we like to sell. Yeah, that's what I can say about it.
Thank you so much. Are there maybe any other policies that are harmful to migrants that you might be able to kind of bring up or would like to discuss further?
Yes, definitely. The difficulties that people face when it comes to permanent residency, to apply for permanent residency, like migrant workers, temporary migrant workers, they come here, they serve very well to our needs and the needs of the global market also, because a lot of that food is also exported. Um, and they just can't live here permanently. They serve, they do a sacrifice working without their families here, because one of the requisites, for example, for the agricultural workers, is to be parents, is to be married, to have kids. Um, and so they do a sacrifice, they serve, and they just don't get anything back except for their salary when they are lucky. Sometimes they are not very lucky. I was telling you before this conversation that there are people literally sometimes in the need to escape the program because they are facing problems with exploitation. They arrive here with dreams. Their family have dreams for particular kind of income, particular kind of time living here, doing a sacrifice to put food on the table, to pay the education for their kids, to pay the house, to build something to live in. And then when they arrive here, not all of them, but there are cases, and they arrive here, they learn that sometimes the employer doesn't follow the rules. They just don't respect the agreements, right? The contracts. And so they had to decide in returning without anything to their places, to being actually, or to stay here to try to survive and to make some money. And so that's an example, I would say, of how public policy can produce illegality, literally, can push people to do things that they wouldn't do in other circumstances. What are other? When, having detention centers, having jails to put people, families, kids, uh, uh, when they are being deported. I think that's another public policy that is unfair, that we can live without it, and we should live without it if we are in a democracy. Um, that's another policy, but probably my memory is short now. There are so many, probably.
That's okay. If you think of any others later, we can come back to it. Um, for regarding what you said about employers not following the rules, are these kind of is this only seen in private industries or in kind of government jobs as well?
Yeah, I have seen is in private in companies, right? The people who arrive, for example, in the temporary migrant, the temporary program, they are recruited by private recruiting companies, and they are governed by bilateral agreements. And so most of the people who hire temporary migrant workers in agriculture are local farmers, medium-sized companies, big companies as well. And some people argue that in academia, for example, argue that some of the abuses that people face in the agricultural sector are due to the fact that sometimes small companies can't keep their promises. They can't pay well, or they have to survive. They have to hire migrant workers, and sometimes they just can't making it through. But I don't think that's that's what I have seen. I have conducted ethnographic research. In fact, I earned my PhD doing ethnographic work on working in factories in Montreal with them. And I learned that you can see cruelty in the field. There are people who abuse people who are that seem to be powerless, who are not protected by the law or protected by family, by coworkers, people who barely speak the language and stuff like that. And there are abuses based on that fact. Um, so there are, yeah, of course, structural issues there, but there are also sometimes uh, in the workplace just attitudes of abuse that can be really eliminated by just making it public, I guess.
And would you note some of these kind of not following rules as, you know, providing less pay, less hours than promised? Is there anything outside of these things?
Yes, women face a lot of, well, not a lot, I wouldn't say a lot, but women, it is likely that women experience sexual harassment. I have heard that quite often in the field, asking people um, uh, that kind of things. Yeah, I would say that that's something that I would like to add by, for the moment. Oh, yes. For example, when people work outside of the city or outside of places like, when you work in the countryside, it's very actually very common, and actually researchers in Canada have produced a lot of evidence about it. It is very common that the employer feels like, with the right to prevent you from going to the town to buy your groceries. They kind of structure your life. You can this day at this time. You can't arrive after this other time. So your life is completely governed by the employers. Sometimes, in particular in rural areas, and that's something that is very, it's against freedom, right? So people feel like I'm just under the control, the complete control. My life is under control of this person, which is not right. But I guess, different industries produce different forms of abuses.
And in instances such as this, their life being controlled by an employer, sexual harassment, I guess they're kind of unlikely to, report these employers or make a complaint because it might put them at risk to deportation. Is that right?
Absolutely. That's you just define it. How is used the concept of deportability. Deportability is the fear of being deported, and so when you are not protected, when you are working here and don't know anybody, you barely speak the language, you are not really protected by the law in several aspects. Uh, well, you just you don't want to mess it up, and you don't want to be returned without money, and you don't want to you just feel you know powerless, in the sense that I don't want to mess it up. I don't want to say anything because I guess that's what I have to endure to get some money to my family. And uh, and that's one of the effects of deportability is the fear of being deported make people docile, to support, not to support, to have to endure any kind of abuse. And it creates a lot of issues, not only in the workplace but also in the spiritual life, the mental health, the physical health of people, because people who are enduring this for a long time, this has been done a lot of research on this in the United States. People who go through the experience of deportability for a long time develop several mental and physical health constraints, including you know feelings of not being a deserving person, low self-esteem, nightmares, and all sort of kind of pathologies, and that are just something that we can live without if we don't have abuses, you know.
Thank you. Hmm. Would you feel comfortable, I guess, naming some of the companies or businesses you've kind of come across that I guess have a history of abusing, the migrant workforce?
Yeah, I wouldn't name, for ethical reasons, when I am allowed to do this kind of research, and I'm more often now because I am researcher, right, at the Basque University. I'm not. I never asked for permission about disclosing the personal names and stuff like that. But I can tell you by industry. And the agricultural sector is the place where I have found more abuses, including what I had mentioned before, touchings and all those kind of sexual harassment and controlling the time, the discipline, the life of the migrant workers in the agricultural sector happens quite a lot. Um, and the food industry, food packing industry also. This is very heavy labor. It's very, very heavy labor. Uh, People, have to you know, work with all sort of very heavy. Meat is heavy, and also there is a lot of there's blood and stuff like that. And it's hard labor. A lot of that labor is at night. Um, and I could say that this is the place. This is in the industry in which I found more like people yelling at migrant workers, even sometimes, slapping. How say slapping a little bit, stuff like that, physical kind of abuse. Um, and people sometimes justify it. They say, it's because you have to really be very, very. You have to endure, hard work, and that means that the how say the supervisor has to be very hard on you and is stressed out all the time. I don't think you can justify any kind of violence under any circumstance. It's just that simple for me. Uh, but those are the places where I would say I have seen the most cases of abuse, physical and verbal and mental kind of abuse. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I guess, if we no longer want to support, I know that we can't, we need food, but say, for example, we no longer want to support these companies that kind of take part in this. Is there anything that we can do? Like, is it essentially all companies, major companies in Quebec? How do we kind of divest from, you know, agricultural companies that abuse migrants?
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. When I say that I can't name, it's just because I am really governed by an ethics of research. But I think people should ask questions about how that that those tomatoes that I have on my table were produced under which conditions. And I think that this is a task that we have, I would say, people who are concerned about social justice, is really to produce evidence and to make sure that people learn how, in particular kind of places, food is being produced, so that we can conduct accordingly, as you say. We can decide if we support or not particular kind of companies. I personally can't do it now, but like that. But definitely I know a lot of places, and yeah, it's something that in the United States and other countries, there are a lot of reports, right? Reports about this is particular companies who are doing those kind of things. And I think we have a long way to go in that sense in Canada. We have a lot of work to do. And I think the work that people like you do is extremely important to make to open up these possibilities, right? To identify where the problems are and what kind of things we can do. Um, Definitely it's a task, and I think we should start it. It's important, yeah.
Thank you. Um, hmm. I guess I know you've already kind of answered this, but I guess I'll just kind of ask again if there's maybe anything else you could say on this. But how is the Montreal, Quebec, and overall federal government letting down people without status, especially ones who contribute so heavily to our society?
Yes, letting down is a good word to put it. It's a good way to put it. Um, Letting down because people arrive here. Uh, you know, I think I have been for like 9 years now working in different capacities, doing research on migration, right? And myself, I have gone through a process. That's another story. But I have been asking a lot, and really, I have never, never, never talked to anybody who came here just to abuse the system, right? Or just to try to take as much benefits as they can. Or no, it's normally it's usually people who are struggling in their countries, escaping violence, escaping precarity, escaping natural catastrophes, escaping persecution from the state, trying to have a better life. Really, that's really the. We can hear a lot of. I read all kind of things in literature on migration, but the reality is that when you go to ask people, in my experience, most of them is people who are struggling, who want to have a better life, and actually people who are very resilient because they decided to move, to go through the whole thing, and to keep going despite of the fact that you have gone through so many difficulties and stuff like that. Sometimes with the whole family. So not abusive people. And so when they arrive, normally, usually, well, they just have to work, right? You have to make a living. You have to continue. You have to make sure your family has the fundamentals to live, or yourself. And people in that process gives a lot, like a lot, to our society. They provide, they clean houses. They make sure that we have food on our tables. They make sure that is my whole thing. Is my whole topic. Is they do a lot of collective. The collective is a labor of love, caring for others, to give something to the society. Of course, you are expecting an exchange a salary because you have to survive. But in order to keep going, in order to make sure that this relationship happens, people do a lot of sacrifices. Like they work at night, they take care of the families at the time people decide. They travel long distances. I have people that I know in Montreal that they go like yesterday. I was speaking to a couple of persons at a safe distance now to take care of each other. But I was speaking to two of them, and I was providing help on how to arrive to a particular place to a friend, and with this we crunched numbers. Just I don't know. It came to the topic. Is you know how many hours he invests in going to the work and return? It's 5 hours, 2 hours and a half to go and 2 hours and a half to come because it's outside of Montreal. Well, people do all those sort of sacrifices, and all those forms of sacrifices are forms of care, in fact, for us, right? And so when the government doesn't recognize that, it's the example, the message is very clear: is we don't like you. We don't care. We don't care about what you are doing for this society. I mean, this conversation started with the example of the guardian angels, right? Is people through the pandemic helping out others, working as a janitors, taking care of senior citizens, and then at the end of the day, it's like, I'm sorry, but you gotta go. Well, you gotta go. You don't have the right to stay here. Now you serve also, but you don't have the right to be here. And so yeah, we let down people, and that's very dishonest. That's not honest. That's not a society I want to live in. And I think we can change that. We definitely can change. We should change that, and we have to produce evidence, of course, that is going on, to make sure that the people learn about it. Because every time I speak, not every time, but often, when I speak to beautiful people that I love loving friends, and sometimes they're like, does this happen in Canada? Just yes. Look at it's not an invention of myself. Look at this newspaper. Look at this note and this video, and so I think making sure that people get aware of what is going on is an important thing, because yes, we are letting people down. The government is letting people down, not the people. I would like to insist on that. There is at the same time, while this happens, this kind of injustices, we have thousands, literally thousands. I have witnessed it. I have collaborated with those efforts very in a humble way. Thousands of people who are providing all kind of support from the smallest detail to the biggest detail that you can imagine to make sure that people who arrive here, who are serving our society, who are trying to integrate, they can have a better experience. And I think that's something that we have to also underline. The labor of love of civil society, the Canadian civil society, who is it's a loving society, it's a welcoming society, in contradiction with the Canadian policies of the Canadian state policies, the immigration policies. They have done a lot of work to make sure that kind of labor is respected and those precarious immigrants are welcomed. I am an example of that. I received so much help through a process I went through several years ago, and I can attest that this is true. There is a loving society out there that we have to, you know, showcase.
Thank you. Um, so I know that, Solidarity Across Borders, you guys do a ton of work to not just help, you know, individual migrants, but to really push for status for all, especially during the pandemic. And you guys did a big kind of, I don't know if I can call it a march, from Montreal to Ottawa in this past summer. And I'm just kind of wondering, the Canadian government, they have over the years, kind of, especially with the Liberal government, opened up immigration, kind of increased the numbers at certain times of how many people can immigrate to Canada. But what is something that could really, you know, change immigration? I don't know if this is maybe too radical, but is it almost the notion of borders just kind of, I guess, allows for a situation like this? I don't know if
Mhm.
this is a clear question, but
Yeah, no, it is a clear question. It's a big question. We need those big questions. Uh, yes, I think, when every time I hear about open borders and it sounds people find it too radical. They say it's not possible to live without borders, and I teach immigration classes, right? And one of the things that I say to my students, look, uh, we all have borders. I mean, our identities are bordered, right? We say I am a man, I am a man, I am whatever I am a border in somehow. I have limits to things, to my own identity, how I dress, how I act, how I speak, etc. Um, we have boundaries, the way in which we organize our society, we organize our space, and we have boundaries, styles, and there are borders as well. I think that the debate about borders or no borders is not really very important for me. What is important is that, in despite of the borders that exist, we have the possibility and the will and the capacity and the infrastructure to cross those borders as much as we have to cross them to make the life better of our life and the life of others. For me, it doesn't matter that borders exist. What matters is that people who are coming from Mexico, my parents who are coming from Mexico, have no troubles to visit me. And that when I go to visit them, who live in Mexico, I have no troubles to visit them. And if I have to go through Ivory Coast one day or to England because I am escaping persecution or whatever, there are people there who make sure that despite that the borders exist, I will be welcome. For me, that's what matters. That how we make sure that we can cross borders when needed to make the life of others and our lives better. I just recently published an article about it. I think it's relevant. I'm not saying about cracks on the borders, it's called. And it's precisely about that. It's precisely about how, in the context of COVID, in which borders have tended to proliferate, right? I mean, borders are securitized now. It's very difficult to travel around. People who came here as in the temporary migrant workers program can return to their houses safely. They can visit them, uh, even to access stuff. There are borders to access them because it's difficult without jobs sometimes, and so on and so on. So there are a lot of borders now, more than ever. And despite of that circumstance, Solidarity Across Borders and Migrant Rights Network organized a march denouncing all the situation of against exploitation and deportation and so on and so forth. And thousands of people. I have pictures of all that. I was so excited to see all that. Thousands of people with all kind of things doing for others. And I said, there's a lot of borders, but a lot of imagination and capacity and will to actually cross those borders, to make sure that people can have a decent life in despite of those borders. I think that is what concerns me, how to create the possibility to cross the borders. Because, as I mentioned, borders exist. We have to be, one of the things that I learned from queer theory, right, is that you don't have to take too seriously the borders, the identity borders. You can be one thing today and then change a little bit and play a little bit around, and that is you always have that possibility in your identity. You have always that possibility. I have been told that I have to act in this particular way, but I will do it in a different way, right? And so we always have that possibility to to transcend borders, and that's what it concerns me. How to develop that will, personal, collective will. Sorry, I don't know if I was clear on that.
No, no, you definitely were. I guess I'm curious from that, what if it's not so much of a concern for you that borders shouldn't exist, but the ability to kind of pass through them easier, what, maybe not just for Canada, but worldwide, what do we need to do to make this happen?
Absolutely, Savannah, and this is not an utopia. The only moment I have been in Europe was several years ago, and I remember I was very impressed because there were political events and stuff. And I remember we took a bus from Berlin to we were going to Netherlands, and then I took sleeps. We were several friends from Mexico, and took some sleeps, and then I learned that we have crossed several countries. And nobody wake me up to say, where are your papers at that time? But now Europe is very different, right? So, it's a matter of time, depends on the context. Borders sometimes get reinforced, sometimes get relaxed. But what can we do ourselves? Well, to create a society in which, of course, borders, if they exist, they're not taken too seriously. Because if we take them too seriously, like today, we have global apartheid, people who can't just really travel to other places. And I think it's our duty, and I'm very convinced about it, that is our duty is to create a global order in which nobody is prevented from crossing borders, from enjoying the world. The world is a beautiful place. It can be a beautiful place. And it could be just lovely that people can explore it and without much troubles. Yeah.
Thank you. Does it, where we are today, is it maybe more difficult to get there or envision this, especially, I guess you could call it in a post-Trump society where we are seeing an increase in polarized politics and even things like Brexit that just makes crossing borders more difficult.
It is definitely. It is very difficult now. But if something we have learned in this context, Savannah, I think we have witnessed that happens for a reason. And that there are, therefore, if things have changed for a reason, probably we can change the conditions so that society moves in another direction. I think that's when I see the trucker convoy here, and people asking for literally privileges in the name of freedom, I just say, the world is just upside down. It's just crazy that people think that is freedom. I should be free to infect people. It's just because I'm me. It's just because it's democracy. And I say, how did that happen? Really, how did that happen? Well, it happened because there are processes, ideological processes. You mentioned the word Trump. There are people like him who are powerful. There are elites who are powerful, who are defending literally, white supremacy, world domination, discrimination, like a blatant discrimination against racial minorities and so on and so forth. And so it's just that an example that uh, we have to do collective efforts to counter, to create another language, another to imagine another world, right? So it is possible. It's just that those possibilities have been how can I say it? Those possibilities have been seized by the right, by those who are against democracy, against freedom, against openness, against love, against recognition, against democracy, against community. But we just have to work hard so that those terms change, and that people who says the new time that is coming, probably the new possibilities are just doing it with the right mind, that is to say, or with the right heart, that is to say, to create just a better world in which we are all respected, equal, recognized, included, loved, um, and all that. Um, yeah. Um, I mean, the 60s, the 60s is important to what happened in the 60s in the United States, or in the whole world, in Mexico, in France. There was a rebellion against a particular kind of order, right? There was an order based on white supremacy and control of the state controlling the life of people, the students, control over women, over the black population, and so on. So there was a big rebellion against it, and one of the key aspects for that rebellion that has been very much studied by social movement study students is that there were that didn't happen just one day. Was not a natural evolution. It was really the will of a lot of individuals that put efforts together, including students, including journalists, including workers, women, people, black communities who were excluded, and so on and so forth, who started working to create infrastructures. And I think this is an important lesson in history. Things doesn't happen like that. We have to do work, but not only work because just talk or just whatever doing. We have to really create infrastructures that make possible that our messages go through. I see, for example, your work in YouTube, right? That is a form of creating an infrastructure. Is something is there, I just put it there, and somebody's gonna see it. And somebody that is gonna see it probably say to their family, their kids, and to their students, is gonna pass the message through. And those kind of little acts are the ones who create those infrastructure that will make possible to change the terms of the debate and to change the terms in which society is moving now. And I think that's what we start have to doing a lot. Infrastructures for protest, infrastructures for changing our society.
I guess I just kind of wanted to shift back real quick to kind of, I mean, not necessarily policies, but the way the government and specifically certain politicians really do affect public opinion on migrants and borders, and bringing up a certain circumstance that happened in December at the end of last year. The Quebec immigration minister, Jean Boulet, he kind of he essentially put out this tweet calling on Ottawa to assume its responsibilities and halt irregular border crossings by asylum seekers at Roxham Road in Quebec. And he essentially said, in the face of another COVID wave. I mean, my own personal take from this is really kind of, linking migrants and linking kind of the spread of COVID. This tweet did create a lot of criticism regarding this link and, the surge in COVID cases at this time. Do you kind of have a reaction to this and maybe kind of a comment on how opinions of xenophobic politicians really kind of create a larger divide in our society from, citizens, residents, and people without status?
Absolutely, yes. I think that's first ignorance, right? As you mentioned, is well, it's just not true. It's not just an informed opinion saying that people are crossing for Roxham Road, which are like 3 per month, I could say, are as a danger to the public. Um, I don't. Look, I think that quite often politicians, experts, policymakers are not basing their policies on evidence. I think that's a problem. I think that's a problem because it's just based on fantasy or on prejudices. And I guess one of the fundamentals of why people believe in democracy is precisely because we understand that democracy is the capacity that people have to to build the society they want. And so when somebody is doing is making up stating opinions about something or developing public policy against evidence is really an anti-democratic act. It's a betrayal to the public. I'm just doing something because I just like it. I is or because I think, and that is something that we have to reverse, and we have to really make sure that to point out those kind of things. Not only by pointing out that people are or xenophobic or any kind of thing, but also but fundamentally because of the fact that it's somebody who's acting like that is really acting against their role. What they should be like, and they are paid for something, and that something is really to inform their actions on what is going on in what people say, desire and wishes, but also in evidence, right? But it's not new. It's not blaming immigrants. It's not new. It's in fact one of the main reasons. That prejudice is one of the main reasons why our public policy regarding migration hasn't changed much for a long time. Canada has one of the, as I already mentioned, in Canada it has a very strong history of Canadian society of support and solidarity and so on. But the government doesn't have that record, and our immigration system is very much still based on a class-based privilege. The fact that you are assigned more. What person was very big fan of the Canadian immigration system? It was Trump. Because in the United States, when you arrive undocumented, for example, with the time you develop the right to apply, and then the way in which is decided if you are deserving of path to permanent residence or not is through lottery, literally through lottery. It's by luck. And here in Canada, it's by points. So really, if you don't have, like, the points is because you have particular age, you have abilities for speaking English and French, and so on and so forth. And so if you have coming undocumented, you don't have the right to path to immigration and so on. And the United States is not like that. You are right, however you are right, you have the right to apply, and luck is going to decide when you're going to become a citizen, a resident. That's more democratic, really. And Trump was very much promoting the idea of adopting the Canadian point-based system and import it to the United States, because that will allow the United States to get rid of all those Mexicans who arrive without not knowing the languages. Those poor from the third world who arrive with nothing, right? The brown, the black, the Muslims, and it's a way to clean up the system. The Canadian system, the Canadian immigration system, this is not an overstatement. Whoever wants to learn about it, they have to read about the history of Canadian immigration policy. The point-based system is really a system that cleans up our society, really cleans up. I'm saying this cleans up in the sense, in a critical way, of course. It makes sure that not much poor are allowed here. Just people who speak several languages, people who have particular kind of education, and so on and so forth. And that's, if you ask me to be very honest, something we have to get rid of if we want to arrive or to create a more democratic and egalitarian society. There is a beautiful book that wrote one of the greatest Canadian sociologist ever, founder of the sociology program at Carleton University, where I studied. I always felt happy to be there for that. His name is John Porter. He wrote a book that is called The Vertical Mosaic. And his analysis is precisely an analysis of how the Canadian immigration system and the way in which the elites hire the workers arrive from different places of the world created a society that is multicultural, is true, but it is a mosaic, he said, but it's vertical. On the top, you see the white population, and the more you go to down, you see the colors there, right? And so he said, yeah, we live in a mosaic, but it's a vertical mosaic. It's the power lies on the white people population. And that was precisely because the immigration system was structured that way, and because the way in which the elite were hiring the workers from outside. The temporary migrant workers program and the immigration laws are the basis of the society in which we live in, which is still in ethnical issues and migration issues extremely hierarchical, extremely exclusive. Um, and I don't think why we support that. I don't think why people don't criticize enough that. We have to do that. I'm sorry, I just came to everything.
No, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. This is really great. Sorry, Im- immigrant mosaic, is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Multicultural.
no, it's called the vertical mosaic. Vertical mosaic. John Porter. It was written in the 50s and then in the 70s was published, and now it's probably the most important book ever written on Canadian society. The name of this professor is John Porter.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. I'm going to check that out. Is there anything that I didn't ask that is important to share? Keep in mind.
I think you asked the most important stuff. I don't know if I was good enough to answer all of that, but you have all the time big questions, and I really appreciate that, Savannah.